Hello. We are Team 2, and we came together to find technology solutions that address some of the crises caused by flooding in Nigeria. We took personal accounts of the victims of the flood, and then used these stories to analyze the needs of victims during these disasters. We then used these needs as the basis for our technology solutions so that these solutions would have a meaningful impact on those who are affected.
Nigeria has a yearly rainy season from May to October, and during this time, Nigeria experiences routine flooding. But in the rainy season of 2012, Nigeria experienced the worst floods in half a century. The result was hundreds killed and 2.1 million Nigerians displaced. This is the account of Malam Ibrahim Shaibu. We started getting scared when the rainfall was getting unusually heavy and was getting prolonged. And before we knew it, water started sinking into our house. At first, we tried to save a few properties, but when a heavy storm suddenly struck and pushed down our house, we were drowning and had to save ourselves first before thinking of properties. And before we did all that, all we had ever worked for had been swept off. There was also the story of a 15-year-old boy named Faisal. Lamenting the tragedy that befell his family, Faisal said, "We tried to rush home with my father. We couldn't pass because all the roads were flooded. My mother, who was at home, then called me on the phone. I heard the voices of my younger ones screaming and crying. Suddenly, the line went dead. That was all. Our house was destroyed, and my mother, Hajaya, with my 4 younger ones, have not been seen up until now." As the floods continued to rise and livestock and farmlands were washed away, those in need began to seek assistance from the Nigerian government and other Nigerians who were offering their help. The most important needs at this time were access to clean water, food, shelter, and medical attention. Another victim of the flood is Mrs. Mary Koshit. Mrs. Koshit was a landlord of a house which was swept away by the floods, and after the house and farm were destroyed, her entire livelihood and income was also destroyed. She reports that 2012 was not the first time her property had been affected by the flooding. This happened last year as well. She recalls, "I reported the case to the National Emergency Management Agency and the state government, but no assistance came to me." Most houses affected were built near waterways. Officials from the National Emergency Medical Association reported they tried to communicate evacuation plans to all citizens in these areas, but not everyone was able to be reached. The situation is an avoidable one if the people had complied with the series of sensitization campaigns we carried out. We will, however, continue with the campaigns until people move to safer ground, one official said. The official said the government had undertaken needs assessments of those affected and was coming to their aid with food items, beddings, and building materials, among others.
These personal accounts and stories guided our process to find the right solutions to address the flood disasters in Nigeria. From these stories, we took that flood victims have different priorities throughout the course of a disaster. At the onset of a flood, victims first try to locate their families and loved ones. After locating them, victims attempt to gain access to clean water, food, and if needed, medical assistance. At this point, some flood victims may not have located their family members and loved ones and are still worrying to try and find them. Throughout these processes, flood victims are also trying to gain information about the flood and learn about the measures being taken to address the disaster. We use these priorities and needs to address the different types of technologies needed throughout a flood. We tackle the challenge of locating loved ones with technologies that teach children and families about emergency preparedness, and with search engines that help locate separated family members. After that, we manage the need to gain access to clean water, food, and medical assistance with maps that guide victims to resource centers. Furthermore, we address the need to gather information about the flood with mobile and radio technologies. We'll address these technologies in detail in the following section of the video.
The Wireless Reach Initiative is a mobile safety program that helps young children and their families learn how to deal with various kinds of emergency situations. Our technology implementation would utilize this initiative to teach young children about proper flood emergency preparedness. One of the first concerns at the start of a flood is to locate your loved ones. Having children know enough information about themselves and their families would facilitate the process of finding a lost or separated child. The Wireless Reach Initiative videos use Sesame Street characters to make learning about emergency preparedness fun, memorable, and effective for young children. RefUnite helps families reconnect to lost loved ones through a safe online search tool. Implementing and popularizing the use of RefUnite would ensure separated families to regroup quickly. RefUnite has already been shown to be an effective technology for thousands of refugees and would be an effective solution to regroup families during flood crises. Another immediate concern during the floods is to receive access to clean food, water, and medical attention. It's impossible to gain access to these resources without knowing where to locate them and how to access them. A technology solution for this problem is the use of open online maps that volunteers can access and update. We would implement a map service that shows resource centers and safe pathways to travel to these centers. Icons would indicate the types of resources available at the centers and would also show how much of these resources were available. This would prevent flood victims from going to resource centers that were running low on supplies. These resource centers would implement RefUnite computer stations to check in flood victims. Victims would add themselves to the RefUnite registry before being able to receive any rations or medical assistance. Victims with lost family members or friends would be able to check their RefUnite stations to see if these lost family members had checked in at any other local resource centers. Another technology implementation to aid victims in the flood crises would be the use of live text and radio updates. Live text updates would serve as a consistent news source for the victims, keeping them aware and ready to respond to the flood. If cellular lines were to go down during the flood, radios could be distributed at the aforementioned resource centers, and flood victims could receive radio updates about the flood. Live text-to-speech versions of the text updates via signals serve as a cheap and easy-to-set-up alternative for cellular technologies, ensuring those without access to cellular devices are also reached.
Nigeria knows it'll experience its rainy season every year. We want the future of disaster recovery in Nigeria to have a strong reliability and integration with powerful information and technology solutions. As countries and communities are continually faced with the realities of natural disasters, we encourage victims and response agencies to leverage existing technologies and continue to search for and embrace innovative new technology-driven solutions.